And I tested very positively in another sense. So this morning, I tested positively toward negative, right? So, no, I tested perfectly this morning. Meaning I tested negative.
Have you taken the antibody test yet?
But that's a way of saying it. Positively toward the negative.
I tested positively toward the negative. I mean, I know what he's saying. We all know what the man's saying. Why do the libs have to act like this is so confusing? He got a little wrapped up in it, and maybe he was trying to have a play on words here. It was the best, the most. I got to work. Look, the problem with a Trump impersonation of any kind is unless you crush it, it's horrible, right? There's very little middle ground here. So I'm not. I've been thinking about how I want to get to the point where the Trumpster. By the way, the Trumpster on TV versus in person. On TV, I think is a little more theatrical sometimes. In person, the tics that you see when he's giving speeches, the specific, the hand gestures, and it's obviously quite different when you're sitting down talking to the guy. So talking to him in person, there's not a lot of, the impersonation is different. Really what you see people do is an impersonation of Trump giving a speech on TV or a press conference. That's where you see the full Trumpiness. Look, the guy said I got the best hair on TV. I'm a Trump voter for life now. I mean, I was before, but what else can you do? So President Trump is trying to get everybody on the same sheet of music here, trying to get everyone to understand that we need to start. When I say start, we need to accelerate all of this, all the movement toward reopen. And I'm pleased to see that finally Dr. Fauci is out there saying the following. Staying closed for too long could cause irreparable damage. Well, no bleep, Dr. Fauci. You're darn right staying closed for too long could cause irreparable damage. So maybe telling everybody, I think there might be another round of outbreaks. I think there might be more. I think we have to be very careful. The mitigation, the social distancing, Yeah, we get it, dude. We've heard all this stuff a million times now. But we also have the data, and the data shows that those who in the earlier weeks of this outbreak were claiming that this was going to be, a 0.2 or 0.3 fatality rate, case fatality rate, were much closer to the actual number than those who were initially saying 3 to 5%. I mean, that was terrifying, right? It's an order of magnitude more. So we're an order of magnitude down in terms of fatality from what we were told. The fatalities are overwhelmingly concentrated in the over 60 category, which does not mean that we are less concerned. I hate what people do here, what the lockdown libs do. When we say people over 60 are at greater risk from this, no person who has any sanity and any voice in this debate at a national level is saying, well, because it's just people over 60. No, of course not. My parents are over 60. People I love the most in the whole world are over 60. It's a question of, okay, what do we do? We have limited resources, limited access, limited time. What do we do to protect people who are particularly at risk? What are the policies? What are the procedures to make sure that we bring down that over 60 fatality rate, bring that number down by an order of magnitude, and then we're at basically seasonal flu? The reason this is so much more lethal is because of how it affects people who are 60 and over. It is not more lethal throughout all age categories in a way that would cause these lockdowns and everything else that we're seeing. So, but see, that's where the demagogues, the dishonest jump in. Oh, you're saying that you don't care about our seniors? Of course not. Senior citizens should be getting the focus of the efforts, the prevention efforts, and the protection of the government. And I know, I'm sure you've all seen this, and I don't, there's this video that's making the rounds. We're not going to show it here on the show, and for those that are watching this on Pluto TV, we're not going to show the video. But there's this horrible video of a guy. It's in Detroit, or it's in Michigan. I think it's in Detroit. Who is abusing a senior. It's on video. It went viral yesterday. They've arrested him, and hopefully they absolutely throw the book at this guy. And this is somebody who needs to be made an example of. People need to know that anyone who physically And I have a friend who was was a federal prosecutor down in the South, and one of the things that he worked on was elder fraud cases, and that's another place where I want the federal government. If someone runs some scam, they send an email and they get the password and they empty out a senior's bank account. That's where that's where all of a sudden these federal mandatory minimums, 10, 15 years. Yeah, that's right. I think that makes a whole lot of sense. So I told him, I said, you're doing God's work, because people that prey on seniors, it just is so morally decrepit and horrific. They need to be made an example of. But, you saw that video and everyone says, oh, look what's going on in Detroit. Here in New York, there was an article written by a woman who was volunteering to help COVID patients. And she said there was a senior facility, and some of them are run by the state. There's a senior facility in New Jersey and it was for people that, it's not necessarily veterans, but it's people who are Gold Star families, veterans. Essentially, there's a series of different connections you can have to military service, and then you qualify to be in this assisted living facility when you're a senior. And the death count was horrible in there. I mean, the stuff that was going on, and you look at the way that some of these facilities in New York are. They're not particularly they're not clean enough. They're just not well run. And I hope that if anything good can come out of the situation here, of the terrible loss of seniors that we have in these facilities, it would be the redoubling of focus and effort and resources on making sure that that's going to be all of us at some point, whether it's family or it's a senior living facility. All of us are going to need those around us to take care of us in our old age and to protect us. And this is really a sacred obligation that society has for those of us who are aging. And we have failed in a lot of places and in a lot of ways in that obligation. We have seen that as a result of this pandemic, not just from the virus. I mean, the Cuomo thing, how people are saying, oh, Cuomo claims that this is what the CDC guidance was. I don't care if the CDC was sending him angry emails every day. The CDC has no say over what the governor of New York does with facilities in his state when it comes to, who gets entry and who's barred from entry. The governor could have said, no, this is our choice. This is our call. Sending COVID positive patients, people who are still coming back with positive PCR tests for COVID-19 back into seniors facilities. It's astonishing that someone could be so stupid and so reckless. But now he's just going around. He's just passing the blame. Says, oh, it's the federal government. This is the classic government two-step. No one's ever to blame, right? It's always someone else's decision. No one ever really made a decision. And yet everyone's doing a great job. That's what they want you to believe. But back to this Fauci thing for a second here, because I've tried to avoid going too deep down the. Look, the thing about Fauci that I found the weirdest was that he was calling Bro Cuomo every night during his quarantine to keep his spirits up. I mean, I guess maybe they know each other from Media World a little bit, but that seemed a little bit like celebrity worship in a way, and at a time when this guy needs to be focused on other things than just one dude who's going to be fine, and we all knew he was going to be fine. Hey, I'm just doing some inverted push-ups while I'm getting through my quarantine. So here you go. Stay-at-home orders intended to curb, this is from CNBC, intended to curb the spread of the coronavirus could end up causing irreparable damage if imposed too long, White House Health Advisor Fauci said to CNBC. Quote, I don't think that any of us feel that staying locked down for a prolonged period of time is the way to go. He said the U.S. had to institute severe measures because COVID-19 cases were exploding. But now is the time, depending upon where you are and what your situation is, to begin to seriously look at reopening the economy, reopening the country to get back some degree of normal. However, Fauci also cautioned states against reducing social distancing measures too quickly, adding they must take very significant precautions. Why is there no sense of urgency for the reopen? We're told there was all this urgency. Remember, the urgency came too late for the lockdowns as well. The disease had already spread all over the place. The disease had already reached pandemic proportions, and then they locked us all in homes where we had less sunlight, less fresh air, more likely to transmit it to family members. So they've completely bungled this thing top to bottom from the start. And now here we are. Some of us are screaming, you are destroying the American economy. Millions of people will have their lives ruined, have jobs lost, have psychological trauma from the stress, the loss of the job. Who knows if some of these industries are coming back? You have all this happening. There should be an urgency right now to reopen. Not this we'll kind of take a look. We'll give it a little time and then we'll look. Let's wait a few more weeks. Maybe August, maybe September, we start to allow you to, go outside and go buy something at the store. No. Now. Open up now. All right. We cannot have the destruction of our society based on the word of these public health experts who have been astoundingly wrong and have not really done very much. I mean, what was the big plan was lockdown and stay home. That's our big mechanism to fight against this. Our big mechanism to fight was get stuck at home. That's the best they could offer us. I'm sorry, that's not impressive. That's not something that makes me think, wow, they've really got a handle on this. They know what they're doing. So Fauci's even saying there could be irreparable damage if we do this too long. Yeah, no crap, Sherlock. We obviously need to get open, and need to get open now. And there are states that have been doing this for weeks, and they're fine. And you know what? Even if they had a little uptick in cases here or there, this is the price we have to be willing to pay as a society. If you're not willing to pay any price as a society for freedom, you are in a totalitarian tyranny. That's the choice here, right? We can either start to have risk and start to take choices back into our own hands, or we can allow bureaucrats, the media, and the elites. I mean, there's polling out today that shows if a solid majority of people who have been affected by this economically want businesses to reopen, and a majority of people that still have a paycheck coming in are like, no, let's just leave it to grocery stores and drugstores for now. Let's just keep that going a bit longer. Oh, but I thought we were all in this together. Oh, no, we're not all in this together, are we? Some are doing just fine and some are getting crushed, and they're getting crushed by policy that the people doing just fine are advocating for and have no qualms about. How many Democrats do you see that show expressions of real rage and real anxiety over what's happening to tens of millions of Americans who have lost their jobs and who now you could say, oh, Buck, guess what? They're not that upset about it because those people are getting paychecks. First of all, not everyone's getting it's not just a question of paychecks. It's also a question of businesses that will not be able to reopen. The clock on their rent is still running. That hasn't stopped. But beyond that, these benefits will run out at some point. And what happens then? I think the problem we have is that the policies have delayed the recognition of what's really going on for millions of people. We have essentially managed to buy off just enough of the electorate that the lockdowners can get away with this. And by the time it's clear to everybody how disastrous this has been, it'll be far too late. It'll be far too deep into it. That's what I think has happened here.
So, Senator, President Trump has been nonstop tweeting about Obamagate, which stems from allegations Obama and senior officials used government power to spy on Trump's campaign. Can you say with 100% certainty that this did not happen and it's all a big Trump conspiracy theory to distract us?
Well, I didn't say it. 17 intelligence agencies. These are nonpartisan. These are people who've risked their lives for us, CIA, NSA. They said it. This came from the Russians who wanted to divert attention from what they did. And for the Senate and President Trump to spend time on this when we have a COVID crisis is just absolutely absurd. We should be focusing on helping people through this crisis, not pursuing already discredited conspiracy theories.
Oh, okay. So let's not find out about the Russia collusion investigation that was the primary news story in this country, pushed by the left-wing Democrat media apparatus for years, ruining lives and attempted ruination of the Trump administration. Let's not find out the truth. We have no need for the truth because, COVID. Anytime someone does this, they say, hey, whoa, this thing you're talking about that I don't want you talking about. Let's not talk about that. Let's talk about COVID instead. Anytime that happens, that they're playing games and they're being dishonest. I mean, there's a dishonesty at the heart of that maneuver. It's very obvious. But Richard Grenell, the Wyatt Earp of the intelligence community, he went in there and he cleaned it up, man. He told the Cowboys, you better get out of town. I see a man wearing a red sash. You know what's going to happen. So, Producer Mark, have you seen Tombstone?
Probably a long time ago.
I feel like if that's your answer, you need to watch it again.
All right.
But
I mean, I have like 17 streaming services, so I'm sure it's on one of them.
What's on the docket for this weekend?
There's this new show on Amazon called Upload that my wife really wants to watch.
Okay. I'll check that one out.
I'll appease her.
Yeah, I'll check it out. So Schumer here saying, we can't find this out. We can't find, it doesn't matter. The whole thing, garbage. Total garbage from this guy. We all know it. Because of the documents that have been released, the Obama administration very clearly was involved at the highest level of targeting Flynn. I spoke to journalist Lee Smith yesterday. This guy's doing a whole series in the New York Post on what it has meant for people who are caught up in this Mueller probe. Here's a question. Producer Mark, what do you think General Flynn's legal bills have been?
Hundreds of thousands, if not at least 1 million.
By the way, I would have said 1 million. So I think that's a good guess. I would have said 1 million. He spent $1 million in legal fees. 5 million. He had to sell his house, and he technically owes $5 million in legal fees. So that's, if you want to know what it means when the Obama deep staters go after you, it means that even if you are very wealthy, you'll be bankrupted. I mean, even if you're a wealthy person worth millions of dollars and you're innocent, they will bankrupt you. Never mind also the damage to your reputation, to your profession, to your all these things, right? So that's where it is. That's where it is. It's stunning. And there's also a few other people, much lesser players in this Mueller probe, and it's coming to light now that there was a woman who was accused of being, she was a Russian researcher, accused of being essentially a honeypot to turn Flynn into a Russian agent. This is from the Mueller people. This is from the so-called honorable, honest, good Mueller probe. Anyone who is still defending the Mueller probe, while Weissman is out there, this is true. Weissman is raising money for Biden this week. Anyone who defends the Mueller probe is either a liar or a moron. All right, just in time for the holiday weekend and a good man to speak to about it. We have my old buddy Pete Hegseth in the mix right now. He is over at Fox News. He's got a new book out, American Crusade. Mr. Hegseth, good to have you on, sir.
Buck, great to be with you, man. Thank you. Congrats on all your success, too, on the radio. You're blowing up, man.
Oh, you're so kind. Well, you're the one with a best-selling book out, so let's get right into that right now, and congrats on that. American Crusade, other than showing all the folks out there that Major Hegseth has been doing some push-ups and has some tats on his forearms, what are we finding out in this book?
We're finding out how much the left has absolutely captured every quarter of our society and how under siege freedom really is and continues to be, and that the election of Donald Trump was an incredibly important moment, but it only opened the door. He has to win again in 2020, and then I liken it to we're stuck in a near ambush right now as Americans. And the only option you have when the enemy has you caught in a near ambush is to charge ahead. And for years, Republicans, conservatives, patriots, we sort of shot back but didn't really know what to do and never charged. Then Donald Trump shows up. He charges at the enemies of freedom, leftists, anti-Americans. And what's the enemy forced to do when you finally charge them? They have to pop out of the tall grass and expose who they are. And we know exactly who they are right now. We know exactly what they've done to our country and what they want to do to anyone who supports the president and freedom. Our job as crusaders is to wage what I call a holy war for the righteous cause of human freedom. Our rights come from God, not from governors, especially right now. And we have to be proud of that, unapologetic like Trump is, and then go beyond politics into culture and education, the things the left has captured in order to create a political moment where the Democrat Party has been captured by leftists, not old school liberals, leftists.
So, Pete, give us some. And we're speaking to Pete Hegseth. He's got a book out now, American Crusade, and we're talking to him about that. So, Pete, give me some of the actions you want to see. Let's assume that President Trump wins re-election. Let's assume he wins re-election. What do you want to see the conservative movement do over the next 4 years?
First of all, learn from him completely. Stop apologizing, have his back. The feigned civility of, the tweets and the tone, drop it, okay? Now is the time to put the foot to the accelerator, defeat the left in the political realm in important ways that demonstrate the contrast, right? You could be looking at a 7-2 Supreme Court. You could be looking at generations of change exactly where it needs to happen. But more importantly, the whole chapter that I write about with the solution, how we fight back, it starts with education, Buck. And the COVID-19 moment brings us under that veil too. A lot of us have kids at home trying to do their homework. Where's the civics? It's gone, replaced with this mushy social studies that pushes an agenda. Where's the math that I can do? It's not there. Where's the history? It's not there. Where's the faith? Well, that's been gone since the 50s and 60s. And we're starting to learn how vapid our educational system is and how it creates minions of the left, which we see all the time. I mean, Comrade Cortez is a great example of that. So it's education, and everyone can address that where they are, kids and grandkids, your kids that went to college and lost their mind. We have to orient them on first truths of our country. So it's an action-oriented book. Sure, I expose the problem like we can all talk about, but here are the intentional ways you as a citizen can get involved in the educational process, take on government schools, and provide a real narrative for kids who, if we're going to love our country, you have to know why you love it.
Speaking of Pete Hegseth, author of American Crusade. Pete, I haven't gotten a chance really to ask you about this yet, but this moment in our country's history, it seems to be one in which we're finding out that freedom is not something that we can take for granted, that governors, that mayors, in the case here in New York, will take as much power as they can into their hands. And I feel like we have not been, as a country at least, vocal enough in this process. What do you think we have to do to get these freedoms back? And I don't mean in the next few years. I mean in the next few weeks.
We have to reopen and be bold. You can respect the virus, but also respect personal responsibility and the idea that free people govern their own risk calculations, take their own risks, and make their own choices. All of it under the rubric of, if you don't want to go out, you don't have to. It's your choice. It's your choice to do so. I mean, I think the phrase that will define the way the left views this is my lovely governor in New Jersey, who said on Tucker's show, the Bill of Rights is above my pay grade. They're not thinking about first freedoms at all. They're thinking about absolute control and how to leverage it. We did our part. We did the 2 weeks. We did the month to stop the spread, lower the curve, all the things that we were asked to do. Trump delivered on all the necessities, whether it's testing or ventilators or hyperspeed on a vaccine. Now it is responsible citizens with civil disobedience moving all together to open up the businesses. And I'm not just saying, okay, thank you for my 25% capacity for the next 2 months. Businesses die with 25% capacity. I'm saying we can take care of our customers. If they don't feel safe, they won't come. Let us be adults. And states that have done that, like Florida, like Texas, have not seen spikes in cases or deaths because we know who this affects. It affects 85-year-olds, 80-year-olds, 75-year-olds in the majority of cases. So I think it's mass movement, mass reopening. You saw the cover of the Post yesterday. I thought it was spot on. Open it up now. And Donald Trump has said he won't close the country down again.
Now, Pete, we're heading into, and we're speaking to Pete Hegseth, author of the new book, American Crusade, which is out now, available on Amazon. Are you going to do an audiobook, Pete? Am I going to get to hear Major Pete? Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, mostly ladies, you can hear Major Pete do his book for you. So there's that. How long did that take you?
2 days. I did it, right as the city had just gotten shut down. So there's no traffic. I zoomed in. I did 10 hours of reads both days and knocked it out.
Fantastic, man. Good stuff on that. But now, before, I know you got to run and do some more TV because you're hosting over there at Fox, but we're heading into, it's a holiday weekend, a time hopefully some people can be with some of their family. I know right now things are strange in that regard. But it's also a weekend where we're supposed to reflect. It is Memorial Day weekend. Pete, you served in the United States Army. You're in Iraq. What does this mean to you, and what are you going to be thinking about over the weekend?
Well, Buck, you serve too, our nation in multiple capacities. You're thinking the same thing I am. It's twofold. It's one, remembering the sacrifice. We're here because men and women are not. Their wives, their sons, their daughters, their graduations, their weddings, they'll never see them. They'll never be a part of it, and they did that for us. So number one, remember, memorialize, find a way to do that. And then the second part is, as you're doing that, enjoy it. The people I lost on the battlefield that I know would want you to have a hot dog, crack a beer, hang out with your family, get out in the sun, enjoy the day, enjoy the freedoms they purchased for you. I know we're not doing parades this year. I hope we get back to it. I'm a big fan of civic ritual. I know we will. But memorialize and then exercise the freedoms we love.
Major Pete Hegseth, everybody, author of American Crusade, United States veteran, and host of Fox and Friends on the weekends. Check him out there. I'll get up early in the morning just to go hang out with Pete sometime on the couch, too. I've been meaning to do that. It's not easy, though, man. It's not easy. The buck is not good in the early morning. I don't know how do you do it? Do you drink coffee like by the gallon?
Yeah, a lot of coffee and a lot of Advil to prevent the hangover, and then just power through it, man. Big nap.
And will you please, is Jedediah Bila, is she back in action these days?
She is, yes.
Well, please give her a big, I was going to say big hug, but give her a big, elbow touch or whatever we're allowed to do these days, and tell her I said regards. All the best. And Pete, congrats on the book. Folks, check it out, American Crusade. And thanks so much, Pete. Pete Hegseth, everybody.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate it.
Here's a national security story that's not going to get a whole lot of attention these days, although it is an opportunity for the left to get angry about Donald Trump. So you'll hear some of it, I'm sure. It depends on where you get your news and what you're watching these days. Trump will withdraw from Open Skies Arms Control Treaty. Now, there's a whole bunch here that we could talk about and get through. But let's just first start with this. The president wants to pull us out of an arms accord because he wants China to also be covered in it. This is the way the New York Times is writing about this, and then I'll get into some more of the details for you. President Trump has decided to withdraw from another major arms control accord and will inform Russia the United States is pulling out of the Open Skies Treaty, negotiated 3 decades ago to allow nations to fly over each other's territory with elaborate sensor equipment to assure that they are not preparing for military action. Mr. Trump's decision may be viewed as more evidence that he is preparing to exit the one major arms treaty remaining with Russia, New START, which limits the United States and Russia to 1,550 deployed nuclear missiles each. It expires in February, weeks after the next presidential inauguration, and Mr. Trump has insisted that China must join what is now a U.S.-Russia limit on nuclear arsenals. So Trump is trying to negotiate a bigger deal here. That's what the president has been saying he would do all along. Just remember, with every national security action he takes, up to this point, we have been told of impending doom from it. Whether it was the negotiation with North Korea's Kim Jong-un, he's going to elevate Kim Jong-un to the world state. This is what people who go to, model UN conferences say when they have nothing else to say. Well, what does that even mean? Elevating him in the world? The guy is a dictator. He's not going anywhere. We all know who he is and what he's all about. Do I think that some of Trump's language, I don't think that Trump is perfect. It would be weird if I did. Do I think that some of the way that he described his interaction with Kim Jong-un is a little, and not what I would have done? Yeah. But have we suffered some terrible loss? No, because he kept all the sanctions in place. Have we seen Iran become some global power and engage in, endless terrorist attacks all over the world because we took out Qasem Soleimani? No, that did not happen. In fact, now the Iranians have been put on notice, and it seems there is a recognition, perhaps, that Qasem Soleimani, one, was a very bad guy who should have been taken off the battlefield a long time ago, and two, the the change in approach from the Iranians may be that they are now more cautious to engage in the provocations they had, and really not just provocations, the covert, the stealth warfare that they had engaged in the past against us. At least they recognize there'll be consequences. I just bring these things up because they're always telling you that whatever Trump is doing is going to destroy the country, is going to be terrible, and that they're wrong, and they're wrong, and they're wrong. And they don't care that they are wrong. It does not bother them because the point of it is just to be opposition and to undermine. And that includes on the most sensitive areas of national defense and national security. It simply does not matter to them. They don't care that Trump has been far more adept on foreign policy with better results in the first 4 years of his administration than President Obama was in his. Now, also, they're pointing to the possibility that Trump will pull out of the New START treaty, which limits the United States and Russia to 1,550 deployed nuclear missiles each. You know, nuclear diplomacy is an area that very few people really understand well. And quite honestly, I think very few people really know what they're talking about, even when they're supposed to be experts. The difference between having, ask anybody, well, having 1,000 nukes or 1,500 nukes, what are we really looking at here? The technology for the deployment of these weapons is certainly worth looking at. You have hypersonic glide vehicles and these other next generation delivery mechanisms for advanced missile strikes of any kind, but certainly for nuclear missiles. And if that can get well beyond any countermeasures, and look, there's going to be in the 21st century, there's going to be a new arms race. I can tell you that because the technology is going to increasingly determine who can hit whom more than just, well, we have nukes and you have nukes. We're going to enter a new phase where people will be looking at ability to both deter strikes in real time or to prevent strikes, to stop them, but also being able to hit other people before they can hit you. All these old concerns or all these old analyses about nuclear parity are going to come back in new ways. That's just my assessment. That's what I believe is going to happen, especially with the rise of China. China is going to say, well, why can't we have whatever we want to have to defend ourselves? And we're not going to have the leverage to do anything other than just try to negotiate with them. I don't think we can trust the Chinese. That's been very clearly determined at this point. But this New START treaty that right now is getting all, I'm sorry, the Open Skies Arms Control Treaty that's getting all this attention. Just remember, the people that are viewing this as a catastrophe have been wrong about everything else. It's not a catastrophe. They could still negotiate a new version to it or an updated version to it. That very much can still happen. I think there's a 6-month phase out here. So remember that as we go through this. Remember that this is not something that's... And also it meant that the Russians would fly these planes because it puts sensors on planes. It has to do with allowing transparency for major troop movements. Europeans are involved in it too, but it puts sensors on planes, and therefore that plane is there, and the plane is also able to see what's going on the ground. And the Russians were effectively using this to spy on us in a lot of ways for a long time, and we've been spying on the Russians too for a long time. And part of the argument here is, given the widespread availability of commercial satellite technology, what used to require a plane flying close to or in someone else's airspace to take photographs of, now you just take with satellites that anyone can really access. So, mapping out what's going on in parts of the world has become easier than it ever is. So why give the Russians a pass to fly planes meant to spy on us so close to us? What are we getting out of this? I think that's part of the reason for people's desire to move away from this. But I'll also say arms control treaties. This is even within the national security discipline, the arms control people, the nukes and missiles people they're their own sub-discipline. I've met very few people that have a knowledge of this that were also experts in other areas of international relations, just because it gets very esoteric. You're reading a lot about the Soviets and all this other stuff. And, you're also looking at something that, in a general sense, isn't exactly where the action's been for a long time. So, they keep looking at these treaties that are decades old, how effective do you think a treaty that was negotiated 3 decades ago, how precise will it be in addressing the national security concerns of the present moment? The answer is not very precise at all. And we saw this with NAFTA even, which isn't a national security. Well, I mean, it's not a national security treaty. It's a trade one. But NAFTA, we kept getting told if Trump touched it, we would melt the economy and all these bad things would happen. And in reality, NAFTA came about before the internet and before a lot of major issues that we've been facing over the 20 plus years of the agreement were clear. And so an updated version of it, the Mexico, U.S., Canada treaty, was in fact absolutely necessary. But, you know, people don't, in the policy community, in the think tank world, they don't like anything to change. They want to just keep giving the same presentation, you know, writing the same think piece for 20 years and then just go home at 3 o'clock every day.